All right. Hello and welcome to the Marketplace Risk Virtual Event Series. I'm Andrea, Director of Events and Logistics here at Marketplace Risk. Today we welcome Amit Dar, Senior Director of Strategy at ActiveFence. Our virtual events are designed to help marketplace and sharing economy startups successfully navigate complex risk management, trust and safety, compliance, and legal subject matter so they can avoid distractions in order to focus on launching and growing. Be sure to check out marketplacerisk.com to access hundreds of hours of content, including our master's program, platform podcast, and previous live events, and to subscribe to our newsletter where we keep you up to date on everything, including the Marketplace Risk Management Conference in San Francisco and the Sharing Economy Global Summit in London. If you're interested in speaking at one of our events, please submit your ideas at marketplacerisk.com. The call for speakers closes on March 15th for the Marketplace Risk Management Conference and August 15th for the Sharing Economy Global Summit. Thank you again, everyone, for tuning into today's session, How Fraudulent Sellers Think and How to Catch Them. First, a couple housekeeping items. This event is being recorded, so the recording will be available for you to access on the Marketplace Risk website. Second, all attendees have listening capabilities only and are otherwise muted. And third, do submit your questions via the control panel. If we have time at the end, we will answer as many questions as we can. If we don't get to yours, feel free to email us at info@marketplacerisk.com and we will get your questions answered. And now, without further ado, Amit, over to you.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you for Marketplace Risk for hosting us. I've had the pleasure of also speaking in last year's event in San Francisco, and look forward to the event upcoming this year and everything that Marketplace Risk does. We'll talk about 30 to 35 minutes about how fraudulent sellers think, and kind of open the curtain a little bit about their operations on the back end, specifically for how marketplaces and e-commerce platforms can mitigate the risk of fraudsters getting to their platform and wreaking havoc, basically. So we'll go in depth behind the scenes of a fraud operation. I'll introduce myself and ActiveFence. We'll talk a little bit about fraud in e-commerce, even though you guys know most of this. And then we'll showcase what platforms can actually do to mitigate the risk of fraud entering their marketplaces and e-commerce platforms. Hey, my name is Amit. I've been at ActiveFence for 1.5 years, but closing in on almost 3 years in the trust and safety space. Before that, I worked in ad tech for 6.5 years, where fraud is an issue as well. And I lead strategy and help with partnerships over at ActiveFence for the past 1.5 years, as I said. For those of you who don't know ActiveFence, we're about a 4-year-old company, about 250 people worldwide right now. We raised $100 million back in June, and we work with the world's biggest and smallest tech platforms to mitigate the risk of online harms. And when we talk about online harms, we're completely agnostic about the type, the media, and the way it proliferates and its virality online. So everything from terrorism and extremism to fraud and scams we'll be talking about today, to disinformation, misinformation. We help tech platforms basically keep their policies enforced and keeping their users safe at the end of the day. Specifically for marketplaces, we provide full visibility on a malicious on-platform activity with context as well. And we identify fraud networks in their infancies, not only showcasing what they're doing, but also learning their tactics, their means and methods. And we'll talk a lot about that in the next 30 minutes or so. We have capabilities to test your defenses and circumnavigate the policies and funnel you put in place to keep these fraudsters out. And we help to create the proactive policies and practices and take out whole networks of malicious activity instead of playing whack-a-mole through end entities. We really want to understand who's behind an operation, where they're getting their ideas from, what are the means and methods, how are they getting accounts on your platform, and instead of taking them off one by one or the end entities one by one, really rooting out the problem so we don't have to go back and do the same work over and over and over again. A couple of points about the cost of fraud. I'm sure this is nothing new to most of the attendees, but just to give everyone a little bit of context, online marketplaces reached $2.7 trillion in 2020, and that number has only gone up in 2021. The jury's still out, but there's already assumptions that number was very close to 3 trillion this past year, and fraud cost up to $20 billion in 2021 for e-commerce and marketplaces. Specifically, there was an increase of 140% in fraud attacks since 2020, and successful attacks increased by half. And it's not only the actual dollar amount on the fraud, right? The money you have to pay back. The actual cost is far more reaching. The resources you put into mitigating the fraud, going through the legal liabilities around it, and setting up your fraud operations, at the end of the day, cost you more, basically 3.6 times than the actual amount of monetary value that is lost to a fraud. That's a huge number. That's why we're all here. And I hope to shed some light on the operations and inner workings of how Fraudsters thinks, and in that way, enable you all to have a little bit more insights and more knowledge into how to combat fraudsters. So when we generally look at a fraud operation, what you see on the far right of your screen is what you see, the on-platform activity, which is malicious in its own ways, right? Counterfeit goods, fake listings, money laundering, fake reviews, a brick in a box. There's a million and one ways once you're on the platform to act maliciously, and this you have visibility to. I hope so. If not, we've got bigger fish to fry, but that's my assumption right now. But before the malicious on-platform activity can actually happen, there's a whole process and web, marketplace and means and methods, forums and communities that are all about getting into your platform to then perform these malicious acts at the end of the day. And we'll go through these steps, and I'll show specific examples that we can find. And we'll talk at the end also about how you can be more proactive in your on-platform activity detection. But the majority of the things I will talk to is about the process of gaining access to accounts by various means and methods that currently exist in not only the deep and dark web, also in the indexed and plain web, which you'll see examples for in just a bit. So let's begin at the beginning. Why is there a demand for an account? As I said, for fraudsters to actually manipulate your platform, they need to get in somehow. And there's hacking of specific accounts, or farming and aging of new accounts, which are the two main ways of gaining access to your account. And let's think about the why. First and foremost, it's anonymity, right? If I have an account that's not really mine, if I want to fraud a certain marketplace, I'm not going to use my own user, which I might actually use for legitimate things at the end of the day. It's going to be traced back to me and be liable and held accountable, hopefully. Second, multiple accounts allow for continued access if caught. These are operations, as you'll see very soon. It's not a one-off thing. Most fraudsters don't work in a one-on-one environment. And keeping up with multiple accounts allows for continued access. And the most important is aged accounts provide credibility. Victims are more likely to pay. They have higher reviews. They go through marketplace onboarding funnels and sellers to circumnavigate those same instances that you wanted to mitigate at the end of the day. And over here, we're already showing two snippets from the dark web of a person or persons selling eBay accounts, which is already connected to a PayPal with reviews to work for verification, as well as we see the other side of this specific marketplace and economy, somebody who was looking for accounts eBay connected to PayPal. Again, he's already mentioning aged accounts and places that have history of transactions and good reviews, so they gain credibility from the back. Compromising of existing accounts. So this is one of the methodologies that fraudsters get in, and they either use two social engineering methods. One is a malware campaign, and the other is a phishing campaign. I'm sure you guys both know of them. They usually use a combination of tactics. I don't think one fraudster or one fraud operation is going to use just one. They'll get these in any means necessary. What is social engineering? It's what everyone here has been getting spammed, probably since in the good part of the last 20 years, whether it's through phones and SMSs, emails, a direct messaging. There's now multiple ways of basically social engineering you to either grant access to your devices or secretly install malicious software in the background. And so, you know, whether it would be Nigerian princess that have all of a sudden discovered you, somebody trying to get to notify you of something urgent and saying that he's the UK government, which we can see here, or actual call to actions to install something because there might be a virus on your computer. And you would think that the majority of the world would have already know better from these schemes, but clearly it's still working. And clearly, as new crypto and NFT kind of scams fall up, or dating scams are now being seen more proliferating, this will continue to happen. There will always be people trying to scam you into, at the end of the day, grant you access or install malicious software. So let's talk about malware. In case you don't know, these are tools that are downloaded on the victim's computer. Granting bad access, usually either access to personal information, to login details, and they're used to take over the accounts at the end of the day. These are also known as stealers, and that's the fraudster name. They're called stealers at the end of the day. There's three types of these malwares specifically for stealing credentials for marketplaces and e-commerce platforms. One is a program that waits for a user to log into a specific platform in order to just steal their credential. That's pretty easy. The second one is programs that access information stored in the user's device, so the actual password hashes. So you don't even have to log into the marketplace or to the platform specifically. Once it's on, you can just find the hashed passwords in the backend, and they can the match over there. And the last one is programs that log keystrokes to collect usernames and passwords. And here we see a print screen of a dark web of malware logs posted for sale. So these are also for sale online. And anyone with access to the dark web, and most fraudsters pay them, and they understand what they cost, and they'll make it back with the fraud that they're delivering at the end of the day. Another type of a method of getting access to the accounts is phishing, which is the simple use of fake URLs or fake landing pages that might look and deceive you into thinking that you're entering somewhere legitimate, whether they're actually calling the website something similar, like an Amazon with two N's here, or something that doesn't even look like the right URL up here about eBay, but will use the eBay logo or something close to an eBay logo. And obviously, once you tap in your credentials here, then that is stored, and you've basically been hacked to your account at these for your marketplace. To a more sophisticated type of creation of accounts is account farming and aging. And here, fraudsters don't overtake or hack somebody's existing account. They actually create new accounts from scratch and artificially age it to gain credibility. So if I was a fraudster, I would create a new account, and then I would use bots or humans in some cases to artificially engage and make purchases from these accounts. As the accounts gain seniority, followers, positive rankings, credibility, time, at the end of the day, they're then being sold for a array of prices for fraudsters specifically. So not only do we have over here an account management tool for account aging, excuse me, a second. We also know that there is actual vendor bots to age specific accounts. So this is a whole ecosystem of fraud behind the curtain of the endpoints that you're seeing on your platform. This is obviously worth money to everyone, and the fraudsters are utilizing other malicious actors to get to the end fraud at the end of the day. So it's quite interesting and complex. And I want to go through a specific case of one vendor. I'll keep my air quotes around him, selling for that sells aged accounts basically. This is a regular website that you can all go onto, powersolo.shop and stealthhacks.com. They get around 12,000 monthly visits of people trying to see what they are, but that doesn't stop there. They actually have multiple social media accounts, which they run marketing campaigns and then marketing funnels that lead into a specific video streaming account with followers on its own to finally lead them into their website for, as I'll show you, subscriptions, monthly subscriptions for aged accounts. Not only that, they also work with a direct messaging marketing scheme, and they are active on ClearWeb Forum, and the thread is literally eBay accounts for sale. So you don't really have to look very hard to find that the whole ecosystem of fraudsters, even before hitting your platform, is a good place to look if you want to understand how these people are operating, and if you want to really root out some of the problems that we're seeing. Here we're seeing the examples of the specific social media accounts of this specific vendor, and they go throughout all types of social media, as well as the actual video streaming platform that they funnel everyone through. You know, one of them here has 136,000 subscribers, and they actually go through a tutorial of how, once you pay them, how a handoff of an aged account would change, how you change the owner, and they actually go through the whole thing. So somebody's putting a lot of time and effort and work into getting his client, and that's actually doing some form of client success and tutorial and education, just like any one of the platforms that are here listening to this is doing on their own to have their clients happy at the end of the day and their users happy. Finally, when we get to his websites, a pretty standard subscription model, which very likened to SaaS offerings that we see in all the great startups or great tech companies in the world, where you can basically have a starter account, silver, gold, or even a platinum account where you get a specific detailed interaction with 6-month warranty, support on WhatsApp and Telegram, the lot basically. Not only that, this specific vendor also sells additional items, stealth guides, how to create stealth eBay and PayPal accounts. He throws us in at bonuses and goes through the whole thing, how to remove cookies from Firefox, new IP addresses, really goes down into the means and methods, new credit cards of how to basically fraud marketplaces. In this case, it's eBay and PayPal, but this exists for probably every marketplace online that has some monetary value going through it. And finally, they're also supporting and guiding beginner fraudsters. They're actually engaged in open communities and threads and forums, and they're guiding and showcasing how to fraud marketplaces, how to start doing this, how to make a profit out of it, how long it will take you to set it up, what's the actual money down that you have to put. The whole lot, as you would think that would happen with legitimate businesses, is also happening with specific illegitimate business. I want to bring in Andrea and do a short poll to hear from you guys. How do you identify fake, fraudulent, or farmed accounts? So we'll take 35 seconds. So I could also get a sip of water, and then we'll see what you guys came back with. All right. So the vast majority of you used behavioral data as the #1 source, and I'm sure you're using third-party vendors, which makes a lot of sense, and third-party identity solutions, which was the second option. So you're relying almost entirely on information that is happening on your platform specifically. And thank you, Andrea. I think we can move back to me. And that's great. By all means necessary, that's the gold standard right now of how to identify fraudulent actors. As we said, third-party identity solutions, behavioral data are definitely the 1-2 punches to a big chunk of them. But there is also an intelligence-based approach on this, and this is where ActiveFence is truly unique in that account. When go off platform and we monitor threat actors, chatters, and we identify new tactics, we don't have to be reliant on new things of behavioral data that we don't know is yet fraudulent. And we do market-based monitoring to identify listing at the source specifically, and we also provide insights into the threat actor tactics and how they're getting there. So for instance, let's say this power seller that we talked about has a new way of aging accounts and is now doing a big campaign about it. Once we are aware of that, we're able to notify, and marketplaces and fraud teams are able to look out for these types of instances of aged accounts or fraudsters operating there. And so you're supplementing and actually adding another layer of protection to those behavioral data and third-party identity solutions that are doing the heavy lifting of the job. And specifically, once you understand the means and methods, the tactics of how these fraudsters work, then you could basically take them down and root the problem out. Right? If I was to take down every aged account that powerseller.com brought up to my platform, that would take a while, and you would change tactics and find a new way to manipulate it. But if I took down powerseller.com as a network and understand how it's working, that's with one stroke, I'm able to take down much more fraud activity. So up until now, we've discussed basically what's happening behind the curtain or up into the point where the fraudsters gain access on platform. And now I want to talk about taking that same approach, the proactive approach for the specific on-platform activities that we're seeing in terms of fraud. So we went over them a little bit at the beginning: counterfeit goods, fake listings, fake reviews, money laundering, and the likes. And we monitor the dark webs to also identify the tactics and techniques and procedures of doing this as well. So what we can find in the dark web are pretty much all you need toolboxes to sell fake luxury goods. And we see a couple of captures here as well. A beginner's guide to selling fake goods, including suggested tactics and tools. And to establish trust, the vendor actually provides examples of client success. They're showcasing how it was so easy to set up the tools and the methodologies to sell fraudulent activities that you should work with him more or buy from him specifically. So one case of what we see in the deep and dark web of people sharing and selling toolboxes and tactics of selling counterfeit goods online. Same thing of creating fake listings. There's a plethora of ways to do this, and a plethora of ways that people share their techniques. And specifically, a new trend that we're seeing, which I've also heard from a couple of people in the audience as well, is the tracking number technique. And people are basically sharing guides on how threat actors can now charge for unshipped items. For those of you who don't know what a tracking number technique is, basically aged accounts are used to create listings and they accept payments. Following the purchase, the fraudster will just generate a fake tracking number, and that automatically initiates the fund transfer from the platform to the fund account. The money is immediately withdrawn and the item is never shipped. And when you go looking for that tracking number that you got on UPS or FedEx or whatever it is, you can't find it because it doesn't really exist. And this is something that we're seeing proliferating and being abused quite a lot now, as it's attacking a new kind of gateway in the whole process of transaction, right? It's actually attacking something that a lot of the platforms don't have in control of with the tracking numbers, right? This is usually the shipment method, or the shipment vendor is in charge of it. But again, another way that people are utilizing deep and dark web locations to share their ideas and means and methods of frauding people on marketplaces. A couple of indicators of fraud listings that we've found to come up and up again. And we see this across the board. Fraudsters might be sophisticated, but they're also lazy. Otherwise, they'll probably get real jobs, or legitimate jobs, I should say. So we see cases of copied text across entities. So different Facebook groups and shops that all have the same exact copy. Clearly, someone is trying to manipulate somebody else. Same thing when we're seeing identical designs and images. These are two completely different websites, probably selling the same things, but the design is identical. All they changed are the logo, a welcome button here, and a drop-down menu on the top left. That's it. Everything else is exactly the same, including the stock imaging behind it. As well as we're seeing things like coordinated pricing. If two different websites sell the same thing to the penny at the same time, there must be something fishy going on. There's enough of a scent here for us to assume that nothing is 100% here, and we should investigate further to see if there's something behind it. Additionally, we've seen in the past a shifting focus for fraudsters. So these guys used to sell special car modifications, or they forgot to update, or they're just in the midst of updating beauty products on the left, completely different things than what the stock image and the actual copy here says. So a lot of times we'll see fraudsters use the exact same mechanisms and procedures, same framed accounts, same aging process, same manipulations happening. They'll just swap out what they're selling as if it's a new account completely. And this goes back to the importance of understanding intelligence-based approach to fighting fraud. If you understand the means and methods, then it doesn't matter what the entity looks like or what they're selling. Because at the end of the day, they are not selling anything at all. There's no inventory. All they're about is frauding the people, and it doesn't matter what the content of it is at the end of the day. So I think this is very indicative to show how understanding the means and methods that's sometimes much more fruitful than actually spotting the actual fraud or catching the end entity that is committing the fraud. So methods to identify fraudulent listings. We have off-platform intelligence gathering. We identify abused PPPs. We look at significantly marked luxury items. That's always a sign that something weird is going on here. Identical pricing across multiple vendors and multiple platforms is always brings up a scent of something malicious happening. Copied text, images, metadata, URLs, stock images, designs. All of these across listings, vendors, and platforms usually mean that there's something deeper going on. And stores that frequently or dramatically change the actual products clearly have something happening behind the scenes. It really doesn't make sense that you start selling car parts and the week after you're selling beauty supplies, and then the week after you go back to car parts. It's usually just an evasion method of your guys' hard work of trying to mitigate the risk of fraud on these platforms. So let's recap what we talked the last 30 minutes or so, and then I'll be happy to answer a couple of questions if you guys have any. Everyone here is well aware of the high cost of fraud. It's continuing to grow. They're continuing to be sophisticated. They're continuing to be adamant in maintaining where there's money, there's going to be malicious activities. We talked about the anatomy of a fraud reputation, that it's not only what you see on platform. It's not only the actual transaction of monetary funds for some kind of good or service. It's a lot that happens beforehand. Accessing accounts with malicious activity, right? There's either hacking of malicious account of existing accounts using malware and farming, or there's generation of completely new accounts which are being farmed and aged specifically for the use of fraudsters. And then finally, we talked about what type of malicious activities happen on platform with these farmed accounts, and the ways that proactive off-platform intelligence approach can provide you with an added layer of protection. With that, I'll ask Andrea to say if there's any questions from everyone. And feel free to ask anything, put them in the chat or wherever you can submit them.
Yeah, perfect. If you have any questions, feel free to submit them in the chat. We have had a few. So the first one is, how can companies utilize the intelligence-based approach to combat fraud?
Cool. Yeah, that's basically, I outlined a couple of things through what we showed. Going and understanding in the dark, deep, and indexed web where chatter happens, malicious chatter is actually happening, is a great way to understand what are the means and methods of fraud is happening. What's the full picture here, right? To the point of how much money are they making? What are their costs on there? What's their incentive? The more you know about your quote unquote enemy, the better you are and the better equipped you are to understand where it will hurt most to hurt them and what their incentives at the end of the day. And that's off platform. Besides that, we know that on-platform activity from behavioral data, you're only as good as what you know, but the unknown unknowns are exactly where intelligence-based approach helps. Understanding that some fraudsters have specific things that they do and showcase specifically that they're fraudsters. There's no need to check what the actual on-platform activity is. We don't need to find a monetary value or somebody to report this. We can go be proactive. And if somebody is aligning and fixing prices across multiple platforms and other vendors, let's investigate, let's see, and let's not wait that somebody will get frauded at the end of the day. Let's take them down beforehand.
Amazing. We did have a question come in. Risk-based and intelligence-based, is there a difference?
What was the question?
The difference between risk-based and intelligence-based.
Yeah, so risk-based, from my understanding, is the general risk of something of a platform, right? If there's a threat intelligence or threat of a risk, then they're looking at people hacking the platform, hacking the actual infrastructure of a platform, hacking the actual accounts. Intelligence approach doesn't necessarily have to be only risk specific. We could go look at the means and methods or how much they're making or how they're acting elsewhere. It doesn't have to be an imminent threat that is happening right now. We might be looking at intelligence that will later on help us with an investigation or to determine which something is fraud or not, or to see a specific trend happening. And I know there's pretty proactive teams out there at some of the bigger marketplaces that have ongoing trend detection risk teams, where they might see a new account takeover method proliferate somewhere in APAC, and they want to alert everyone worldwide. So by the time that the US wakes up, they're already over it, and that account takeover methodology doesn't work. So that's a risk-based approach to look at when things are actually happening. Intelligence goes one beyond that. You have to think and gain knowledge even without knowing there's risk there, which is imminent right now. And it's a precursor to a risk-based approach, in my opinion.
Awesome. We do have a few more that just came in. You mentioned common language used in listings. What are some examples of known common phrases?
So first of all, as I said, stealers that came up, aged accounts, farmed accounts, credibility, good credibility, everybody's looking for that. There's also, it's worth mentioning that a lot of what's happening in the deep and dark web is not in English, and I don't know those language good enough or well enough. I guess I don't know English that well as well, with that mistake. But so you have to have coverage in multiple language if you're going to take an intelligence-based approach, and you have to know some of the lingo as well. I'm sure for whoever asked that question, he can reach out specifically, and I can get him in touch with some of our analysts who actually helped me build this whole thing and made me shine, and they'll be happy to help with specific keywords and words that come up when we look for specific things like that.
Thank you. Another one, in your experience, what has been the most effective identity verification method to detect fraudulent accounts? They noted frictionless paybase, ID scan and selfie match, etc.
Yeah, I think it really changes depending on what your marketplace does. From my experience, a face match and identity card are pretty foolproof, but they're also more privacy centered, and there's a big buffer into the onboarding, right? And that makes sense when your marketplace is a service marketplace, or there's a real life connection between them, and you really want to know who's involved. If it's a marketplace that's just a transaction of goods, that might be a little heavy on your seller onboarding funnel. So you might want to mitigate that and only ask to upload an identity, an ID, not necessarily do a face recognition as well. There's also privacy concerns of doing that, which depends on which jurisdiction you work in, and whether that's allowed or not allowed. But that's definitely the one that, in my view, is a pretty strong overall.
Awesome. Next question that came in. What is one strategy that you have not seen so far that you believe will combat efficiently fraudulent activity?
It's quite simple. It's basically knowledge sharing between the different marketplaces, and standardizing and sharing information between the marketplaces of tactics that they see on their platforms. It's a hard and big ask to do, especially in an industry that there's a lot of competition between the companies. But usually when you get standardization and there are clear lines of what's allowed and not allowed, and information is being shared, then you could stop fraudsters from moving from vendor to vendor and abusing, or from marketplace to marketplace and abusing them using the same thing that they've done. Really copy pasting it. Just okay, on Amazon they got kicked off, so they'll go to Walmart. I actually read an article like 2 days ago that a lot of the Chinese sellers that were banned from Amazon have all moved to Walmart, and it's quite an interesting flow that I think is quite prevalent in the marketplace industry. And the more knowledge share between companies, that's probably the strongest strategy that we can have to combat this.
And we did have 2 more come in. Let me know if we don't have enough time. The next
No, we're
one,
good.
how do you visualize these fraud networks to understand second and third degree players?
Great. So when we work with clients, that we provide the full network analysis, a full diagram of whatever we can get our hands onto. And a lot of times it will be who's doing the account aging, account farms, where they're being sold, how they're being sold. Sometimes it's through other PayPal accounts. Sometimes it's through cryptocurrencies, to the end point of who's actually managing this. When there's cases, just like we saw in the use case that we showcased, where there's actual social media accounts and marketing in play, and really a full-blown operation around it, then we showcase all of that as well as proof that this is not a one instance or that this is not legitimate at all. And that gives the full view of what a network operation or a fraud network operation could be. In the case when we're very successful and we also find, in some cases, the actual warehouses or production lines for counterfeit goods, then we'll include those as well, specifically client per client, based on where we're working and how successful we are in our intelligence gathering.
Great. 2 more. First one, will you expose the identity of the fraudulent sellers?
So if they've acted on our client's platform, and through that information was available online, sure. We're completely GDPR compliant, we're SOC 2 compliant, we play completely by the rules and the regulations and jurisdictions. So any publicly available information that we can share with our clients at the end of the day to help mitigate this risk, or if there's illegal activities happening that we must report to law enforcement agencies, then we will of course do that. And in some cases, when they're involved with selling of illicit goods, firearms, pharma, et cetera, then we'll engage in whatever legislative and law enforcement activity we need to with our counterparts.
Awesome. And last question, how do fraudsters price these accounts?
Good question. It's a marketplace on its own, and pricing is a huge issue. So it depends on the geography it operates, the language it operates on, what they've sold in the past, how credible they are, or how long they've been aged specifically, how many reviews they have on there, how much money has been accessed through the specific accounts. And you can imagine that this fluctuates based on demand and supply. So it's a hard question for me to answer because it's such a pretty wide gap, as well as their different marketplaces have different types of price points. So if you want the aged account for a marketplace that's selling things for $2-5, it's going to be on the cheaper side. If you want a marketplace that is selling with I don't know, jewelry or high-end watches, it's going to probably come a little bit pricier. But again, whoever asked that, happy to get offline and try to provide more context.
Perfect. And the questions do keep coming in. I mean, I don't know how much longer you have in your deck. Do you want to take some more time for Q&A?
I'm done. Keep them coming as long as I'm here.
Perfect. I know we touched on it already, but are there any recommended mitigations to prevent fraudulent account aging?
So yes, but these change a lot. So account aging, usually based on your onboarding funnel of a seller, there's a cutoff point, right? Where you're like, okay, this guy has already done $1,000 in revenues, and he's been on the platform for 6 months, and there's 5 good reviews, so let's open it up a little bit more. And these fraudsters already know. They're smart. They do trial and error. So first of all, I would look at changing those frequently, and making sure that there's not a systematic abuse. And that's where behavioral data does come into play and does really help. So if you're seeing an amount of accounts switch owner or switch shipping location or switch PayPal account or whatever at a time frame that is specific and is trending, meaning it's happening more and more and more, then that's a good way to mitigate the risk of account aging in that regard. The other is not to incentivize so much credibility in these cases. Make it hard for people to try to age farms and make them prove to you. I've heard of a marketplace that has asked that a seller or sellers send specifically some of what they're selling to the actual marketplace on a periodic timetable, so they know that this is a legit seller at the end of the day. Now that doesn't scale, but it is another way to mitigate this risk.
Awesome. And regarding false positives, will you publish the data for them?
So our intelligence-based approach, there are no false positives, I dare to say, or very, very little false positive. And that's because we don't look at just behavioral data and discern in specific. So if we do a full mapping and a full network analysis of a fraudster, and we take the time to go through it, then there's not going to be a case of a false positive here. We'll report it and investigate it only if we're 100% sure that there's something fishy going on. And at the end of the day, it's not our decision if we take them down or not. We go back to our clients and they make the decision if there's enough proof or enough things to take someone off completely or keep a closer eye on him, et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome. Well, that's all we have for questions. Again, if you think of anything, do not hesitate to reach out. info@marketplacerisk.com. Any closing remarks for us?
Nope. Thank you all for the time and the valid and interesting questions. Feel free to reach out to us at ActiveFence to learn more about how we take the proactive approach to fraud in specific marketplaces. And I hope to see you guys in the next events in San Francisco and London and elsewhere in the world.
Amazing. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. As a reminder, check out marketplacerisk.com to access this recording, along with hundreds of hours of content, and to subscribe to our newsletter to stay up to date on all events. Thank you, Evan, and have a great day.